I'm Samantha Parker, 32, successful in marketing but invisible in my family. Tonight, at Reynolds, the upscale restaurant where we're celebrating Mom's birthday, my brother Ryan orders a $400 Wagyu steak while Dad suggests I just have bread since you're watching your figure. This wasn't new. Years of favoritism had shaped my entire existence. Everyone laughs as the waiter places the extravagant bill between Dad and Ryan as usual. When the bill came, I straightened my spine and said something that silenced the entire restaurant. Before I dive deeper into what happened, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments below, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt overlooked in your own family. Trust me, what I said next changed everything, and you won't want to miss how this all unfolds. Growing up in our middle-class suburban home outside Boston, I learned early that there was a hierarchy in our family, and I wasn't at the top. From the beginning, my brother Ryan was the golden child, athletic, charming, and somehow exempt from the rules that governed my existence. I was the responsible one, always at the top of my class, the one who never caused trouble. Yet somehow, this translated to being the one who received less of everything, less attention, less praise, and definitely less financial support. When we were kids, the disparity showed up in small ways. Ryan's soccer equipment always had to be top of the line, while my art supplies came from clearance bins. His academic mediocrity was met with boys developed differently, while anything less than an A on my report card prompted concerned discussions about my focus. Birthday parties? His were elaborate affairs with dozens of friends, while mine were simple family dinners with maybe one friend invited. The pattern only intensified as we got older. When we turned 16, Ryan received a brand new Ford Mustang, my father beaming as he handed over the keys. "Every young man should have a reliable car," he'd said proudly. 3 months later, on my 16th birthday, I was told I could use the family's old Honda Civic occasionally, if I helped pay for gas. By the end of that year, I was working part-time at the mall to save for my own used car, while Ryan had already crashed and received repairs for his Mustang twice. College was where the favoritism became impossible to ignore. Despite Ryan's lackluster grades, my parents paid full tuition for his business degree at Bentley University, an expensive private school. They covered his apartment, his meal plan, his textbooks, even his spring break trips. "Networking is important for his future," my mother explained when I questioned a particularly lavish ski vacation. Meanwhile, I cobbled together scholarships to attend UMass, worked 20 hours a week at the campus bookstore, took out small loans, and lived in the cheapest dorm available. When I graduated with honors and minimal debt due to my own careful planning, my father's comment was, "Well, you've always been good with money." The years following college only reinforced the pattern. Ryan bounced between entrepreneurial ventures, each one requiring more investment from my parents. First, it was an app that never launched, then a sports memorabilia business that folded within 6 months, a juice bar franchise that he lost interest in before it opened. With each failure, there were no consequences, just more family money poured into his next sure thing. I built my marketing career from scratch, starting as an assistant, working overtime, carefully building my portfolio and network. When I landed my first major client, my mother said, "That's nice, dear. Did you hear Ryan is thinking about property development now? Your father is so excited about it." Our monthly family dinners became a showcase for this dynamic. Ryan would arrive late, be celebrated like a returning hero, dominate conversation with tales of his business prospects, and leave early for important meetings. I'd arrive on time with thoughtful gifts or homemade desserts, listen attentively, ask questions, and somehow still feel invisible. The few times I tried to share my own accomplishments, the conversation quickly shifted back to Ryan. Our parents had settled into their roles perfectly. Mom, the eternal nurturer who cooked Ryan's favorite meals and did his laundry well into his 30s, and Dad, the financial controller who viewed Ryan as the son carrying on his legacy. Together they formed a united front of enablers, with Mom softening Dad's occasional frustrations whenever Ryan's ventures lost money. Ryan, for his part, had mastered manipulation. He knew exactly how to charm our mother with affection and flatter our father with talk of building the family name. When he needed money, he'd casually mention competitors succeeding in ventures he'd abandoned, reigniting Dad's determination to help his son show them all. Despite years of therapy helping me recognize these patterns, I still showed up, still hoped for change, still loved them, despite the inequality that hung over every interaction. I'd built a successful life on my own terms, yet something in me still craved their approval, their recognition that I mattered just as much as Ryan. But tonight's dinner would test even my well-practiced patience. As I parked my sensible Honda, purchased entirely with my own money, outside the restaurant, I had no idea that this particular family gathering would finally break the cycle that had defined my entire life. The evening started like most family gatherings, with me arriving exactly on time at Reynolds, a white tablecloth establishment with crystal chandeliers and waiters in bow ties. Mom had always wanted to try this place, and for her 60th birthday, Dad had finally relented. I found my parents already seated at a round table draped in crisp linen, cocktails in hand. "Samantha, you made it," Mom said, standing to accept my hug. I handed her a small, elegantly wrapped box containing the David Yurman bracelet I'd been saving for over 3 months to buy. She thanked me politely, setting it aside without opening it. "Ryan's running a bit late," Dad explained unnecessarily. Of course he was. 20 minutes later, as I sipped my water and listened to Mom talk about her garden club, Ryan burst in with his usual energy. "Happy birthday to the youngest-looking 60-year-old in Boston," he announced loudly, kissing Mom's cheek and handing her a card that I could see from my seat had been hastily signed. "Oh, you remembered! That's so sweet," Mom gushed, immediately opening the card, which contained a generic message and Ryan's signature, nothing else. "Sorry I couldn't get you something better, Mom. I'm between capital rounds right now," he said with the charming smile that always worked magic. "Just having you here is present enough," she assured him, patting his hand. Dad signaled for the waiter. "Let's get Ryan a drink. The usual? Son? Macallan 18? After Ryan had his scotch, and the conversation had centered around his traffic woes for a solid 10 minutes, I saw an opening to share my news. "I actually got some good news yesterday," I began. "Henderson and Mills offered me the senior director position. It's a major step up, and I'd be managing a team of 15 people. "Oh, that's nice, honey," Mom said with a quick smile before turning back to Ryan. "So tell us more about this investor meeting you mentioned." "Actually," Ryan cut in before I could respond, "I've got some big news too. I've decided to pivot industries." He took a dramatic sip of his scotch. "I'm launching a boutique marketing agency focused on luxury brands." I nearly choked on my water. Marketing, my field, the industry I'd spent 10 years building expertise in. The blood drained from my face as Ryan continued. "There's this massive gap in the Boston market for high-end brand development. Most agencies here are too generic, not exclusive enough." He looked directly at me. "No offense to your company, Sam, but the real money is in specialized luxury marketing." "That sounds fascinating." Dad leaned forward, instantly engaged in a way he never was when I discussed my career. "What's your approach going to be?" "Exclusivity. We'll only take clients with 7-figure minimum budgets. I've already been talking to some contacts from Bentley who are in perfect positions now." I sat in stunned silence as Ryan outlined a business model that sounded remarkably similar to the one I'd mentioned developing at my company over the past year. Had he been listening after all when I talked about work? "Of course. I might need some investors to get the premium office space and staff I need right away," Ryan added casually, looking at Dad. "What kind of initial capital are you thinking?" Dad asked, already reaching for his phone as if ready to make transfer arrangements. "Around 200,000 to do it right," Ryan replied confidently. "But I've got about 50,000 set aside already." Mom turned to me with a bright smile. "Samantha, wouldn't it be wonderful if you could help your brother? Since you're already established in marketing, you must have lots of contacts you could share." I sat frozen, processing several betrayals at once. Not only was Ryan entering my field with zero experience, not only was he clearly planning to compete directly with my agency, but my parents had apparently already given him $50,000 to set aside for this venture. "When did you get into marketing?" I finally managed to ask, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've always had an interest," Ryan waved dismissively. "Remember how I used to come up with slogans for Dad's hardware store?" "When you were 12, I clarified. "Business is business," Dad interjected. "The principles transfer across industries." The waiter arrived to take our orders, providing a momentary reprieve from the conversation. Dad and Ryan both ordered the Wagyu steak special, $400 per plate, according to the menu. Mom selected the lobster thermidor. When my turn came, I chose the cedar plank salmon. "Samantha, Dad interrupted before the waiter could write it down. You're always talking about watching your figure. Why don't you just have bread? Save some money too. He turned to the waiter. She'll just have the bread basket. The waiter's professional mask slipped for just a second, revealing a flicker of pity before he recovered. Very good, sir, he said, collecting the menus. As he walked away, I felt a familiar burning humiliation rise in my chest. At 32 years old, with a six-figure salary and an impending promotion, I was being told to eat bread while everyone else enjoyed a lavish meal, and was expected to be grateful for the consideration about my figure. Ryan smirked slightly before turning back to Dad. So, about that initial investment, he continued, as if nothing unusual had happened. I picked up a piece of bread and took a small bite, wondering how many more of these dinners I would endure, before finally accepting that nothing would ever change. As I nibbled on my dry bread roll, watching Ryan enthusiastically cut into his perfectly seared $400 Wagyu steak, memories of similar situations flooded my mind. This humiliation was just the latest in a lifelong pattern. Last year, I'd needed emergency gallbladder surgery. My insurance covered most of it, but I was still left with an $8,000 bill during a period when I'd been between jobs for 2 months. When I hesitantly asked my parents if they could help, the first time I'd ever asked for financial assistance as an adult, Dad had lectured me about responsible financial planning and emergency funds. We can't just bail you out every time you have a problem, Samantha, he'd said sternly. You need to learn to handle these things yourself. 3 weeks later, Ryan had called them from Turks and Caicos, having maxed out his credit cards on an impromptu vacation with friends. They wired him $12,000 that same day. I took another small bite of bread and watched Ryan regale our parents with stories about a luxury condo he was considering in Back Bay. The amenities are incredible, he was saying. Rooftop pool, concierge service, private wine lockers. Sounds like a wonderful investment, Mom beamed, as if he were discussing a prudent financial decision rather than another extravagance. I excused myself to use the restroom, needing a moment to collect my thoughts. As I walked back toward our table, I overheard Ryan speaking in hushed tones to Dad. So I'll need another $75,000 or so by next month to secure the office space and hire the first 2 employees, Ryan was saying, leaning close to Dad's ear. That's a bit steep on top of the 50 we already gave you, Dad replied, but his tone suggested he was already calculating how to make it happen. It's a competitive market, Ryan pressed. We need to move fast. You could use some of Mom's retirement money temporarily. I'll pay it back double once we land our first few clients. My blood ran cold. Not only was Ryan shamelessly asking for more money, but he was suggesting they take it from Mom's retirement fund, and Dad was actually considering it. I slowed my pace, listening from behind a decorative column. I've already reached out to some of Sam's clients, by the way, Ryan continued, taking a sip of his third scotch. Mentioned I was starting a new venture and that we should grab coffee. A couple of them seem interested in hearing my pitch. That's my boy, Dad said proudly, always thinking ahead. I felt physically ill. Ryan was planning to poach my clients, people I'd built relationships with over years of dedicated work, and my father was congratulating him for it. I returned to the table, my hands trembling slightly as I sat down. Sam, you look pale, Mom noticed. Are you feeling all right? I just overheard something interesting, I said, looking directly at Ryan. His eyes narrowed slightly. Eavesdropping isn't very ladylike, sis. Neither is stealing someone's clients, I replied evenly. Dad immediately went on the defensive. Your brother is simply networking, Samantha. That's how business works. In my industry. With my clients. After you've already given him $50,000 without mentioning it to me. Mom reached for my hand. Samantha, you've always been jealous of your brother's success. He's taking initiative while you've been at the same company for years. I've been building a career, I said, my voice rising slightly despite my efforts to stay calm. While Ryan has bounced from failure to failure with your financial safety net, we've always supported you equally, Dad said firmly. You're just ungrateful. We paid for your education. I had scholarships and loans. Ryan went to a school twice as expensive, and you covered everything. That's enough, Dad snapped. This is your mother's birthday dinner. Stop making everything about you. Ryan sat back with a satisfied smirk, knowing he'd won again. The familiar urge to leave, to escape this toxic dynamic, washed over me. I could walk out, drive home, and spend another evening trying to convince myself that I didn't need their approval or support. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the years of therapy helping me recognize unhealthy patterns. Maybe it was the bread sitting like a stone in my otherwise empty stomach. Or maybe it was simply that after 32 years, I'd finally had enough. The rest of the meal passed in strained conversation. Mom prattled about neighbors I barely remembered. Dad and Ryan discussed the marketing agency plan as if I weren't even there, a marketing executive sitting right at the table. I watched them, really watched them, from a new perspective. The way Ryan carefully manipulated every interaction. The way Dad puffed up with pride at Ryan's half-baked ideas. The way Mom smoothed over any tension that might force actual accountability. When dessert arrived, 3 elaborate chocolate soufflés and nothing for me, I didn't even feel the sting anymore. I was too busy having a moment of complete clarity about the role I'd played in this dynamic. By showing up, by accepting the scraps of attention and affection thrown my way, I had enabled this behavior as much as my parents had enabled Ryan. The waiter approached with the bill, a leather folder that he placed, as always, between Dad and Ryan, the men of the table. Dad reached for it automatically, but something inside me shifted. A lifetime of swallowing my feelings, of accepting less, of making myself smaller to avoid rocking the boat, it all coalesced into a single moment of decision. It was time to break the cycle. As the leather bill folder sat between Dad and Ryan, I reached across the table and picked it up. "Let's split it fairly this time," I said, my voice calmer than I felt. 3 pairs of eyes stared at me in shock. In our family's 20-plus years of dining out together, I had never once touched the bill. "Don't be ridiculous, Samantha. I'm paying as usual," Dad said, reaching for the folder. "Give that to me." I held it just out of his reach. "Actually, I think Ryan should pay for his own $400 steak." The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with a knife. A couple at the next table glanced over, then quickly looked away. "Samantha," Mom hissed, "this isn't appropriate. Give your father the bill." "Why isn't it appropriate?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Ryan is 35. He's starting a business. Surely he can afford his own dinner." Ryan's face darkened. "What's wrong with you? Are you really making a scene over a dinner bill?" "This isn't about the bill," I said, setting it down in front of me. "This is about a pattern that's gone on my entire life. Ryan gets the $400 steak, the private university education, the new car, the failed business bailouts, and apparently now a $125,000 investment in a field he knows nothing about. I get bread and lectures about financial responsibility." Dad's face was turning red. "We have supported both of our children equally. We've always been fair." "Have you?" I asked, still keeping my voice level. "When I needed help with medical bills last year, you told me to be more responsible. 3 weeks later, you sent Ryan $12,000 for a vacation." "That was different," Mom interjected quickly. "Your brother was going through a stressful time. After his 3rd failed business that you funded, I finished for her. Meanwhile, I've never asked for money before or since. One time, for an emergency surgery, and you made me feel like a failure for asking." "This isn't the time or place for this conversation," Mom said, looking around nervously at nearby tables. "It never is," I replied. "That's how this continues. We never talk about it at home. We never talk about it in private. There's never a good time to address the elephant in the room." The waiter approached, sensed the tension, and quickly retreated. My family squirmed in their seats, uncomfortable with conflict in public. I realized that was exactly why this moment was so powerful. They couldn't simply walk away or dismiss me without creating an even bigger scene. "You're trying to ruin Mom's birthday," Ryan said, playing his favorite card, making me the villain. "Why are you so selfish?" I turned to look at him directly. "Real family support isn't just financial, Ryan. It's being there when someone needs you. It's celebrating their accomplishments. It's treating them with basic respect. When was the last time any of you asked about my promotion, my friends, my life? When was the last time you saw me as anything other than the responsible daughter who doesn't need attention because she handles everything herself?" Mom's eyes welled with tears, but whether from genuine emotion or embarrassment at the public confrontation, I couldn't tell. Dad leaned forward, his voice low and threatening. "If you continue this, there will be consequences, Samantha." I looked him straight in the eye. "There already have been consequences. For 32 years, the words hung in the air between us. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I saw uncertainty in my father's expression. He was used to controlling every situation with money or authority, but here in public, with me calmly stating facts rather than emotionally reacting, his usual tactics weren't working. "All we've ever done is try to help both our children succeed," he finally said. But his voice lacked its usual conviction. "You've helped Ryan avoid consequences," I corrected him. "That's different from helping someone succeed. And you've taught me that no matter what I achieve on my own, I'll never be as valued as your son." Ryan scoffed. "Classic victim mentality. You've always had everything handed to you and still found a way to complain." The absurdity of this statement, after I'd literally been given only bread for dinner while he ate a $400 steak, was so ridiculous that I actually laughed. It was a genuine laugh, born of the sudden clarity of seeing the situation for what it truly was. "What's so funny?" Ryan demanded, his face flushing. "Just the irony," I said, still smiling slightly. "You're accusing me of having things handed to me while you're eating a steak that costs more than some people's weekly grocery budget, paid for by our parents." At 35, Dad's patience was visibly wearing thin. "Enough, Samantha. Give me the bill. Apologize to your mother for ruining her birthday, and we can discuss your concerns another time." I looked at the leather folder in front of me, then back at my family. "No, Dad, I don't think I will. Did you know," I said, reaching for my purse, "that Ryan has already received $50,000 for this new marketing agency, and that he's asking for another $75,000? That's $125,000 for a business in an industry he has zero experience in." Mom blinked in surprise. "It's not that much, Richard, is it?" Dad shifted uncomfortably. "Business investments require capital, Margaret. You wouldn't understand." "I understand numbers," Mom replied, looking troubled. "That's a significant portion of our savings. It's an investment in our son's future," Dad insisted. I pulled out a manila folder from my purse. "I've made an investment too," I said quietly, "in understanding exactly what happens to the money you give Ryan." Ryan's face paled slightly. "What are you talking about?" "After the 4th time you started a business, took Mom and Dad's money, and then abandoned it within a year, I got curious," I explained, opening the folder. "So I hired a private investigator to track your business dealings." "You what?" Dad exclaimed, loud enough that several nearby diners turned to look. "That's a complete invasion of privacy," Ryan sputtered. I laid out several photographs on the table. "This is Ryan meeting with his suppliers for the juice bar franchise you invested in. Notice the location? It's the Wynn Casino in Las Vegas. And these bank statements? They show withdrawals of almost all the business capital at ATMs in casinos across 3 states." Mom gasped softly, her hand going to her throat. "And here," I continued, placing a timeline document on the table, "is a complete history of Ryan's businesses. Average lifespan, 4.7 months. Average parental investment, $83,000. Total money invested over 10 years, just over $750,000. Dad's face had gone from red to ashen. "This can't be accurate." "Every transaction is documented," I said calmly. "Every business entity, formation, and dissolution. Every business trip that mysteriously coincided with major sporting events or concerts. Ryan isn't an entrepreneur, Dad. He's using you as an ATM." Ryan stood up abruptly, knocking his chair backward. "She's making this up because she's jealous. She's always been jealous of me." Several diners were openly watching now. The waiter hovered uncertainly near the kitchen door. "Sit down, Ryan," Dad ordered quietly. To my surprise, Ryan obeyed, righting his chair and sitting down, though his hands were shaking with rage. "Even if these allegations were true," Dad said carefully, "it doesn't excuse your behavior tonight, Samantha. Family matters should remain private." "Should they?" I asked. "Because keeping things private has allowed this pattern to continue for decades. Ryan manipulates you, takes your money, fails, and then convinces you to give him more. Meanwhile, I've built a career entirely on my own, never asking for anything, and I'm treated like an afterthought." "We're proud of you too," Mom offered weakly. "No, you're not," I said gently. "You're not proud, or not proud. You barely notice what I do." When I mentioned my promotion earlier, a major achievement in my career, you immediately changed the subject to Ryan's latest scheme. Mom at least had the grace to look ashamed. "This is absurd," Dad said, but with less conviction than before. Ryan has had some setbacks, but he's ambitious. He takes risks. He takes your money, I corrected. There's a difference between taking risks and having no consequences for failure. Ryan, seeing his father wavering, went on the offensive. Dad, you can't seriously be listening to this. She's clearly fabricated all of this out of spite. You know how she's always been perfect little Samantha who can't stand that you love me more. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Mom gasped. Dad's eyes widened. Ryan, Mom whispered. That's a terrible thing to say. But Ryan was too far gone to stop now. His mask of charm had completely slipped, revealing the entitled, angry person beneath. Oh please, like it's some big secret? Everyone knows Sam's always been jealous of our relationship, Dad. She can't stand that you and I have a real bond. That's what this whole dramatic scene is about. I felt strangely calm. Is that what you really think, Ryan? That I'm jealous of your bond with Dad? I don't want what you have. I don't want to be 35 years old and still dependent on my parents for everything. I don't want to have never earned anything on my own merit. Enough. Dad slammed his hand on the table, making the glasses jump. Samantha, I will not tolerate these accusations. If you continue with this vendetta against your brother, there will be serious consequences for your place in this family. And there it was, the ultimate threat. Fall in line or be cut off. Not financially, as I'd never received that kind of support anyway, but emotionally, relationally. If I didn't accept my role as the overlooked daughter, I would have no role at all. Ryan smirked, sensing victory. He leaned toward me and whispered, "They'll always choose me. Always have. Always will." In that moment, looking at my brother's smug face, my father's angry one, and my mother's tearful confusion, I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. I'd known the truth my whole life but had been afraid to face it. Now that it was laid bare, there was nothing left to fear. I know, I said quietly. I just needed to hear it one final time. I placed a $20 bill on the table, more than enough to cover my bread and water. I gathered my folder of evidence, returned it to my purse, and stood up. Samantha, don't you dare walk out, Dad warned. Happy birthday, Mom, I said, ignoring him. I hope the next 60 years bring you more joy than the obligation you've settled for. I walked out of the restaurant with my head held high, feeling dozens of eyes on my back. For the first time in my life, I wasn't worried about making a scene or disappointing my parents. The cool evening air hit my face as I stepped outside, and I took a deep breath. It felt like the first real breath I'd taken in 32 years. The week following the restaurant confrontation passed in complete silence from my family. No angry calls from Dad, no tearful voicemails from Mom, not even taunting texts from Ryan. The silence was unusual. Typically after any minor disagreement, Mom would call repeatedly until peace was restored on their terms. I spent the week in a strange emotional limbo, alternating between empowerment and grief. At times, I felt liberated, replaying the moment I finally stood up for myself. Other times, usually late at night, the weight of potential estrangement from my only family pressed on my chest until it was hard to breathe. My therapist, Dr. Chen, offered an emergency session where I recounted the entire evening. This is a significant step, Samantha, she said. You've been working toward setting boundaries for years. But was it worth it? I asked. I may have lost my entire family in one night. What you lost was an illusion, she replied gently. The family dynamic you're grieving never truly supported you. On day 8, the first contact came, a text message from Mom. I don't know why you chose to embarrass us like that. Everyone makes sacrifices in families. Your father and I have always done our best. There it was, the minimization I'd expected. No acknowledgement of the revelations about Ryan, no recognition of the patterns I'd pointed out, just disappointment in me for disrupting the carefully maintained facade. Dad's email arrived the following day. Longer but no more self-aware. Samantha, your behavior at your mother's birthday dinner was disrespectful and completely unacceptable. Families support each other, and your accusations against your brother show a troubling lack of family loyalty. Ryan may have made mistakes, as all young entrepreneurs do, but he has our values and understands the importance of family. I suggest you take some time to reflect on your priorities and your place in this family. The thinly veiled threat at the end wasn't lost on me. Conform or be cast out. The same dynamic that had always existed, now explicitly stated. Ryan's message came 3 days later. A masterclass in false contrition. Hey sis, I know things got heated at dinner. I may have said some things I shouldn't have. You know how it is when we get into it. Childhood stuff comes up. Anyway, Mom's pretty upset, so maybe we could smooth things over. I value our relationship more than some silly argument. I read it 5 times, recognizing the familiar pattern. No actual apology. No acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Just a request to smooth things over. Meaning return to the status quo where he received everything and I accepted scraps. After considerable thought and another session with Dr. Chen, I sent the same response to all 3 of them. I need some time and space to process everything. I'm setting a boundary of no contact for the next 3 months. I'll reach out when I'm ready to discuss moving forward with healthier family dynamics. The reactions were predictably different. Mom sent crying emojis and, "But we're family." Dad didn't respond at all. Ryan sent a passive-aggressive, "Wow, dramatic much? Whatever you need, princess." I blocked all their numbers, social media accounts, and email addresses. It felt both terrifying and freeing. What I didn't anticipate were the professional consequences of my stand. 2 weeks after the restaurant incident, my boss called me into her office. "Samantha, I received a strange call from a potential client. They said a Ryan Parker contacted them, claiming to represent Parker Marketing Group, a boutique agency specializing in luxury brands. He apparently mentioned a family connection to you." My stomach dropped. Ryan is my brother, but he doesn't work in marketing. He has no experience whatsoever. That's what seemed odd. The client was confused because he implied he was working with you or had your endorsement. I took a deep breath and made a decision. "Janet, I need to be completely transparent with you." I explained the family situation, the restaurant confrontation, and Ryan's history of manipulation. To my relief, Janet was understanding. "I appreciate your honesty. Let's document this situation and make sure the team knows to direct any inquiries about Parker Marketing Group to me directly." That afternoon, I discovered Ryan had contacted not 1 but 5 of my clients. I spent hours making calls, clarifying the situation, and repairing potential damage to relationships I'd spent years building. The 6th betrayal came a week later, when my cousin Sophia called. "Sam, what's going on with you and Uncle Richard? He's telling everyone you had some kind of mental breakdown at a restaurant and accused Ryan of stealing from them. Aunt Margaret is devastated." Of course they'd created their own narrative. I explained what actually happened, but I could tell Sophia was skeptical. Later that day, I received messages from 3 other relatives, all expressing concern about my fragile mental state and urging me to make amends with my poor parents. The isolation was overwhelming. Not only had I lost my immediate family, but the extended family was now viewing me as unstable and ungrateful. I'd known there would be consequences to standing up for myself, but the coordinated effort to discredit me was beyond what I'd imagined. The final blow came when I discovered my parents had increased their financial support to Ryan even after everything I'd revealed. My Aunt Martha mentioned casually in a voicemail that Richard and Margaret are so generous, helping Ryan secure that beautiful office space for his new company in Back Bay. That night, I hit emotional rock bottom. Curled up on my couch, I questioned everything. Had I made a terrible mistake? Would silent compliance have been better than this painful ostracism? I'd stood up for myself, but at what cost? The turning point came unexpectedly. My phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Samantha Parker?" a woman's voice asked when I answered. "Yes, who's this?" "This is Diane Roberts. I'm a friend of your mother's from her garden club. We were at adjacent tables at Reynolds the night of, well, your family's discussion." I closed my eyes, mortified. "I see." "No, you don't," Diane said firmly. "I wanted to tell you that I witnessed the entire exchange, and I thought you showed remarkable courage. I've known your mother for years, seen how she talks about your brother versus you. What you did wasn't easy, but it was necessary." Tears filled my eyes. "Thank you for saying that. My daughter went through something similar with my husband before I divorced him," Diane continued. "It took her moving across the country before I realized what was happening. Some families need a bomb to disrupt toxic patterns. You threw that bomb, and whether they admit it or not, they needed it." After that call, something shifted. I began receiving messages from friends who'd noticed my withdrawal, offering support and company. My colleague Teresa invited me for weekend hikes. My neighbor Michael started checking in regularly. My old college roommate Allison called more frequently. I began to understand that while I might have lost my biological family, at least temporarily, I wasn't actually alone. The 3-month boundary I'd set began to feel less like a punishment and more like necessary space to build a life based on genuine connections rather than obligation. Dr. Chen helped me see that this was a critical transition period. You're grieving the family you wished you had, she explained, but you're also creating room for relationships that actually nurture you. By month 2, I'd established new routines. Sunday brunches with friends instead of tense family dinners. Evening calls with supportive acquaintances who became closer friends. Weekend trips to places I'd always wanted to visit. I threw myself into work, earning praise for a particularly successful campaign. I still had moments of doubt and sadness. Birthday cards I wouldn't send. Family holidays I wouldn't attend. The occasional memory of good times that made me question my decision. But increasingly, those moments were balanced by a growing sense of peace. The quiet certainty that I'd done the right thing, not just for myself but ultimately for my family too, whether they ever recognized it or not. When the 3-month no-contact period ended, I felt stronger and clearer than I had in years. The constant need for my family's approval had lessened, replaced by a growing appreciation for the supportive people I'd surrounded myself with. Mom was the first to reach out, with a text that read simply, "The family is gathering for Thanksgiving at our house next Thursday. We miss you." No acknowledgement of the issues I'd raised. No mention of the boundaries I'd set. Just an expectation that I would return to the fold as if nothing had happened. After consulting with Dr. Chen, I decided to respond with a compromise. "I'm not ready for a full family gathering yet. Would you and Dad be willing to meet me for coffee at Riverside Cafe next Saturday? Just the 3 of us." The response came quickly. "We'd prefer you just come to Thanksgiving. Everyone will be there, and we don't want to create drama by having separate meetings." Everyone meant the extended family, Aunt Martha and Uncle James, cousins and their spouses, Ryan of course. The prospect of facing all of them at once, without having resolved anything with my immediate family, made my stomach churn. "I'm not comfortable with that," I replied firmly. "I'm offering a smaller meeting as a first step." After several more exchanges, my parents reluctantly agreed to meet, but insisted it be at their house, not a public cafe. Warning bells rang in my mind, but I agreed with one condition. We would meet at 2 p.m., and I would leave by 4 p.m. A defined exit time felt important. When I arrived at my parents' colonial-style home in the suburbs, the driveway was full of cars. My heart sank as I immediately recognized Aunt Martha's Lexus and Uncle James's pickup truck. This wasn't going to be the small meeting I'd requested. Mom opened the door with a too bright smile. "Samantha, you're here. Everyone's so excited to see you." I stood my ground on the porch. "Mom, we agreed it would just be us and Dad. This isn't what we discussed." "Oh, well, since family was in town for the holiday weekend, we thought it would be nice for everyone to see you." She lowered her voice. "They're all very concerned, sweetie." Against my better judgment, I stepped inside. The living room was packed with relatives, the entire extended family on my father's side. Aunts, uncles, cousins, even my grandfather, who rarely left his retirement community, and in the center of it all, Ryan, looking somber and concerned. "Surprise?" I said flatly, looking at Dad who had appeared in the hallway. "Samantha," he said with a nod. "Come sit down. We're just worried about you." It was an intervention. They'd gathered the entire family to pressure me back into my assigned role. The realization was both infuriating and sadly predictable. "I told you I wasn't comfortable with a large gathering," I said, remaining standing while everyone else sat watching me. "This isn't about comfort," Aunt Martha said firmly. "This is about family, about doing what's right." For the next 45 minutes, I stood through a carefully orchestrated performance. Each family member took turns expressing concern about my outburst at the restaurant, my accusations against Ryan, my disrespect toward my parents. "We've always known you were the sensible one, Samantha," Uncle James said gravely. "That's why this behavior is so alarming. Your parents have done everything for you, and your brother," Aunt Martha added. "Nobody's perfect, but this ingratitude is shocking." Ryan sat silently through most of it, occasionally nodding solemnly or placing a comforting hand on Mom's shoulder when she dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. The The performance was masterful. He'd positioned himself as the wounded party, the dutiful son supporting our parents through the trauma I had caused. "May I speak now?" I finally asked during a pause. "Of course, honey," Mom said. "That's why we're all here, to listen. I requested a private meeting with you and Dad to discuss establishing healthier patterns in our family. Instead, you arranged this performance. That itself demonstrates exactly why I set boundaries. You didn't respect a simple, reasonable request." Murmurs of disapproval rippled through the room. As for the accusations against Ryan, they weren't accusations, they were documented facts. "Ryan has taken approximately $750,000 from you over the past decade with nothing to show for it. And now he's taken another $125,000 for a marketing agency in a field he knows nothing about." "Business investments involve risk," Dad interjected. "You wouldn't understand because you've always played it safe." Actually, my cousin Thomas spoke up unexpectedly from the corner. "I was wondering about that too." Thomas, my father's brother's son, had always been quiet, studious, and largely overlooked. Much like me, Ryan's had a lot of businesses that didn't go anywhere. "That's a lot of money to lose." Ryan shot Thomas a look of pure venom. "Nobody asked you." "I'm just saying," Thomas continued, gaining confidence. "When I needed help with graduate school tuition, Uncle Richard said the family didn't have resources to give handouts. But Ryan seems to get funding for every new idea." An uncomfortable silence fell. Thomas and I locked eyes across the room, a moment of understanding passing between us. "I wasn't the only one who had seen the pattern," Ryan quickly redirected. "This is exactly what Sam does. She turns people against each other, makes everything about money." "It's not about the money," I said quietly. "It's about what the money represents. It's about being valued equally. It's about consequences and accountability." Mom burst into tears. "Family is everything, Samantha. Why can't you just let this go? We all love you." I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt a wave of sadness. "Do you, Mom? When was the last time you asked about my life? My hopes? My struggles? When was the last time you defended me when Dad or Ryan dismissed me? Love isn't just words, it's actions." The room grew uncomfortably silent. Dad finally spoke, his voice hard. "I think we've heard enough. Samantha, you have a choice to make. Either you apologize for the accusations you've made, the embarrassment you've caused, and rejoin this family on appropriate terms. Or what, Dad?" I asked. "You'll cut me off? From what, exactly? I've never been given the financial support Ryan has. I've built my career, my home, my life entirely on my own. What leverage do you actually have besides emotional manipulation?" His face flushed with anger. I'd named the dynamic so explicitly that he had no response. Ryan stepped in, playing his part. "This is exactly what I mean. She twists everything, makes herself the victim." I turned to him. "You told me at the restaurant that they'd always choose you. You were right. They have. But that doesn't make what you're doing okay." "I never said that," Ryan scoffed, looking around at the family. "See how she makes things up?" I felt a strange calm settle over me. The patterns were so obvious now, so predictable. This whole intervention was just another manifestation of the same toxic dynamic I'd been raised in. "I came here hoping to start a healing process," I said, picking up my purse. "Instead, you've confirmed that nothing has changed. Thank you for the clarity." "Samantha, don't you dare walk out again," Dad warned. "I'm not walking out, Dad. I'm walking away. There's a difference." I turned toward the door. "If you leave now, don't expect to be welcomed back," he called after me. I paused at the door and turned back to face the room full of relatives. "I love you all, I really do, but I won't participate in this dynamic anymore. When you're ready for an honest conversation about building a healthier relationship, I'll be ready too." As I walked to my car, I heard footsteps behind me. It was Thomas. "Hey," he said awkwardly. "That was. I just wanted to say I get it. What you said in there. About the patterns." I nodded, feeling an unexpected connection with this cousin I'd never been particularly close to. "They're already in there saying you're having some kind of breakdown," he said with a grimace. "That you need help." I couldn't help but laugh. "Of course they are. Anyway, I just wanted to say, I think it took guts. What you did in there. And at the restaurant." He shuffled his feet. Maybe we could get coffee sometime? I've been dealing with some similar stuff with my dad. I felt a small spark of hope, not for reconciliation with my parents or Ryan, but for the possibility of authentic connections within the extended family. I'd like that, Thomas. I really would. As I drove away, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. The reconciliation had failed, but in its failure, it had confirmed I was on the right path, and perhaps, in the most unexpected way, it had helped me find an ally I never knew I had. 6 months after the failed intervention, my life had taken on a new rhythm. The initial pain of estrangement had dulled to an occasional ache, present during holidays or when I passed family restaurants, but no longer consuming my thoughts daily. Professional success brought unexpected joy. My work ethic and creative approaches had caught the attention of Henderson and Mills's executive team. Beyond my senior director promotion, they'd assigned me to lead our agency's pitch for Lux Brands, a prestigious conglomerate that would be our largest client if secured. Your presentation was exceptional, Samantha, James Henderson himself told me after our final internal review. Your perspective on authentic luxury marketing is exactly what Lux needs. I'd built genuine friendships too. Weekly dinners with Teresa had evolved into a close bond. Michael from my apartment building introduced me to his running group. Thomas and I met monthly for coffee, gradually healing our own complex family dynamic. Dr. Chin noticed the change during our now bi-weekly sessions. You carry yourself differently, she observed. There's a groundedness that wasn't there before. I feel it, I admitted. Like I'm making choices from a place of self-worth rather than seeking validation. That's significant progress, she replied with a smile. How are you feeling about the family situation? Better than I expected, I said honestly. I still have moments of sadness, but they're less about wishing for their approval and more about mourning the relationships we could have had. My mother had begun sending tentative text messages, surface-level communication without acknowledging our conflict. Happy birthday wishes, a photo of her garden, weather updates. I responded with similar pleasantries, maintaining the boundary while leaving a small door open. My father remained silent. Ryan, predictably, had made 2 attempts to re-establish contact, both when he needed something. First professional contacts, then a reference for an apartment. I was in this new steady state when an unexpected challenge arose. My apartment building was being sold and converted to condominiums. Residents had first option to purchase their units before they went on the market. You should definitely buy, Teresa advised over dinner. Property in this neighborhood is only going up in value. The numbers make sense, I agreed, but I need $30,000 for the down payment within 60 days. I had savings, but not enough. The timing was tricky. My year-end bonus would come just 2 weeks too late. I explored options. A short-term loan, liquidating some investments, even picking up freelance work. Late one night, an unwelcome thought surfaced. My parents could easily loan me the money. Before my estrangement, I might have swallowed my pride and asked, knowing they'd given Ryan far more for far less important reasons. The temptation was strong. A simple phone call might solve my problem, but something stopped me. Asking would mean re-entering the toxic dynamic, becoming another supplicant seeking their financial blessing, being compared to Ryan. I'm struggling with something, I told Dr. Chen at our next session. Part of me wants to ask my parents for help with this down payment. What's stopping you? It would come with strings attached, implicit expectations to return to the family on their terms. And I'd be participating in the same financial control pattern I've criticized. What alternatives do you have? I thought for a moment. My colleague Derek mentioned he's looking to invest in real estate. Maybe a partnership would work. We could co-own until I can buy him out. This solution felt right, creative, independent, and based on a mutually beneficial arrangement rather than emotional obligation. Derek and I drafted a fair agreement, splitting the down payment and establishing clear terms for eventual buyout. The condo purchase was proceeding smoothly when I encountered the 8th betrayal. At an industry networking event, I overheard 2 potential clients discussing a persistent marketer who kept calling them. Parker something, one said. Claims he's got family connections in the industry. Keeps dropping names of people at Henderson and Mills. My blood ran cold. Ryan was still attempting to poach my clients, even after everything. The next morning, I requested a meeting with Janet and our legal team. We drafted cease and desist letters to Ryan and his nascent agency. documenting his false claims of affiliation with our firm and specifying potential legal consequences if he continued. 2 days later, I received an angry call from a number I didn't recognize. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Ryan's voice demanded when I answered. "You sent lawyers after me? You've been falsely claiming connection to my firm and attempting to poach my clients," I replied calmly. "That's potentially illegal." "It's business, Sam. Everyone networks. You're just trying to sabotage me because you're jealous." The familiar accusation no longer had power. "No, Ryan. I'm protecting my professional reputation and my company's interests. Your actions have consequences." "You've always been pathetic," he spat. "You think you're so much better than me because you've got a job working for someone else while I'm building something of my own." "Is that what you call it?" I asked. "Taking money from our parents and pretending to start businesses that never materialize?" "At least I have our parents' support," he shot back. "They've basically disowned you." "That was their choice," I said, surprising myself with my calm. "And I've made peace with it." His voice turned suddenly, chillingly honest. "I've always hated how easy everything was for you," he said. "Perfect grades, perfect job, perfect life. You never needed anything from anyone." The admission stunned me. Was it possible that beneath his entitlement and manipulation, Ryan had actually envied my independence? "It wasn't easy," I said quietly. "I worked incredibly hard for everything I have. The difference is that I was allowed to fail, to struggle, to learn from mistakes. You never were." "Whatever helps you sleep at night," he muttered, but the venom had left his voice. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Ryan," I said, meaning it. "But not by using my name or trying to take what I've built." I hung up, feeling strangely light. For the first time, I'd confronted Ryan as an equal, not a resentful younger sister or a jealous competitor, but simply as myself, standing firm in my boundaries and truth. The next week brought a surprise. While presenting at a major industry conference, I spotted several colleagues from competing agencies in the audience. After my presentation, one approached me. "Brilliant work, Samantha. We've heard great things about your campaigns." "Thank you," I replied, genuinely pleased. "Also," she lowered her voice, "just so you know, your brother has been reaching out to several of us, claiming insider information about Henderson and Mills. No one's taking him seriously." Word had spread. Ryan's attempts to leverage my reputation had backfired, damaging his own credibility in the industry. I felt no satisfaction in this, only a sad recognition of how his patterns continued to undermine him. That evening, I returned to my newly purchased condo, my own space, secured through my own efforts and a healthy partnership. As I unpacked the last few boxes, I found a photo I'd kept of my family from years ago, a rare moment of genuine happiness at my college graduation. I placed it on a shelf, not hidden away but not prominently displayed either, just a part of my history, neither defining me nor forgotten. The complicated people in that photo had shaped me, through both their love and their failures, into the woman I'd become. And for perhaps the first time, I was truly proud of that woman. 1 year after the restaurant confrontation that changed everything, I stood in my kitchen making coffee, watching the early morning sunlight filter through my condo windows. The space felt wholly mine now, decorated with art I loved, filled with books that inspired me, arranged for my comfort and joy rather than anyone else's approval. My phone buzzed with a text from Teresa about our weekend hiking plans, followed by a message from Thomas sharing news about his recent promotion. My world had expanded in unexpected ways since setting boundaries with my immediate family. Relationships had deepened, new connections had formed, professional opportunities had flourished. The Lux Brands account was now mine to manage after our successful pitch, bringing both prestige and a substantial year-end bonus. I'd paid Derek back for his portion of the down payment 6 months ahead of schedule. My team at work had doubled in size. Most surprisingly, my relationship with my mother had begun a tentative healing process. After months of surface-level texts, she'd finally called me directly rather than attempting to communicate through relatives. "I've been thinking about what you said," she'd admitted during that first awkward conversation. "About asking about your life, your hopes." There was a long pause. "I'd like to know more, if you're willing to tell me." We'd begun meeting for monthly lunches, just the two of us, in public places where neither of us could be trapped or pressured. The conversations were sometimes stilted, sometimes tearful, but increasingly honest. "Your father doesn't know I'm meeting you," she confessed during our third lunch. "He's still very hurt." "Hurt or angry?" I'd asked gently. She'd stared into her tea for a long moment. Both, I think. No one has ever challenged him the way you did. My father maintained his distance, but even that had evolved. When I sent a card for his birthday, he hadn't returned it as I'd feared. My mother reported that he'd placed it on his dresser without comment. A small acknowledgement of my continued existence in his world, if not yet in his heart. Ryan's marketing agency had predictably failed within 6 months. According to Thomas, who still maintained contact with the family, Ryan had blamed market conditions, unreliable employees, and insufficient capital, everything except his own inexperience and poor business practices. Uncle Richard couldn't bail him out this time, Thomas had told me over coffee. They're stretched thin after remortgaging the house. I felt no satisfaction in this news, only sadness that predictable consequences had finally caught up with my brother after years of artificial insulation from reality. Ryan's actually working for real now, Thomas continued. Some entry-level sales position at a tech company. He complains constantly, but he's sticking with it. It's weird to see. This, at least, felt like potential growth. Perhaps hitting genuine financial bottom without parental rescue might be the catalyst Ryan needed to develop actual skills and work ethic. As I sipped my morning coffee, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Samantha Parker?" a woman's voice asked when I answered. "Speaking. This is Marjorie Williams from Apex Digital. I've heard impressive things about your work with Luxe Brands. We're looking for a marketing VP at our East Coast headquarters, and your name came highly recommended." My heart raced as I jotted down details for an interview. The position would mean relocating to Chicago, a clean start in a new city, with significant career advancement and substantially higher compensation. 2 weeks and 3 interviews later, I received the offer letter. The opportunity was everything I'd worked toward professionally: creative control, executive leadership, recognition of my expertise, and the timing felt somehow perfect. A chance to build on the personal growth of the past year. After accepting the position, I decided to tell my mother in person, rather than over the phone. We met at our usual cafe, the familiar routine now comfortable between us. "I have some news," I said after our drinks arrived. "I've accepted a position as marketing VP at Apex Digital. It's in Chicago." Her eyes widened. "Chicago? That's quite far away." "It's a wonderful opportunity," I explained, describing the role and what it meant for my career. She nodded slowly, absorbing the information. "Your father will say it's because of the family situation." "It's not," I said truthfully, though I can't deny that having some distance might make our healing process easier. "Less pressure." "Will you come back for holidays?" she asked, her voice small. "I'd like to establish some new traditions," I suggested. "Maybe you could visit me in Chicago sometimes. We could explore the city together, just us." The idea of seeing my mother outside the loaded environment of our hometown, away from my father's influence and the weight of family history, felt hopeful. She reached across the table and took my hand. The first physical contact we'd had in nearly a year. I'd like that. When I returned home that evening, I found an email from my father, the first direct communication since our estrangement. It was brief, just 3 lines. "Your mother told me about the Chicago position. Congratulations on your achievement. Be careful in a new city." Not warm, not reconciliatory, but an acknowledgement nonetheless. A tiny crack in the wall of silence. The final family dinner before my move to Chicago was a study in contrast to the fateful restaurant confrontation a year earlier. I'd suggested meeting at a casual bistro, neutral territory, reasonably priced, relaxed atmosphere. To my surprise, both my parents had agreed. Ryan declined, which was probably for the best. The conversation was sometimes awkward, sometimes surprisingly easy. My father spoke little at first, but gradually joined discussions about Chicago architecture and the company I'd be working for. Topics that felt safe, separated from our painful history. When the menus arrived, I ordered exactly what I wanted, a moderately priced entree that sounded delicious. No one suggested alternatives or made comments about my choices. When the bill came, I reached for it without hesitation. "This one's on me," I said simply. My father opened his mouth as if to protest, then closed it again. "Thank you, Samantha," my mother said, the words carrying weight beyond the meal. As we said goodbye outside the restaurant, my father surprised me by awkwardly extending his hand. "Good luck in Chicago," he said formally. Then, almost reluctantly added, "We raised a capable woman. You'll do well there." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even an explicit acknowledgement of the past year's conflict. But in its own way, it was a concession. Recognition of my competence, my independence, my personhood outside the family system. "Thank you, Dad," I replied, shaking his hand and resisting the urge to step in for a hug that neither of us was ready for. The journey from that first confrontation to this moment hadn't been linear. There had been setbacks, painful realizations, moments of doubt. The relationships remained complicated, the healing incomplete. But standing there on that sidewalk, I recognized how far I'd come, not just in setting boundaries with my family, but in establishing a life built on genuine self-worth rather than external validation. The most expensive meal of my life was that free basket of bread, but finding my voice was worth every penny. The price of authenticity had been high, but the freedom it purchased was beyond value. I'd discovered that family could be both chosen and born, that love could include boundaries, and that sometimes the bravest act of love is walking away until healthier patterns can emerge. As I packed for Chicago the following week, I realized that wherever I went, I now carried something I'd never fully possessed before: the quiet, unshakable knowledge that I was enough, exactly as I was. What was the most difficult boundary you've ever had to set with someone you love? Have you ever had to walk away from a relationship, even temporarily, for your own well-being? Share your stories in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else who's struggling with similar challenges. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more stories of personal growth and family dynamics. And hit that share button if you know someone who needs to hear this message. Thank you for coming on this journey with me. Remember that your worth isn't determined by anyone's ability to recognize it. Until next time.